We're happy to have you join us this morning on this interesting topic. This topic is kind of different from our normal webinar topics. And our webinar topics, as you know, have been on building and construction issues, concrete spalling, piping, roofing, contractor licensing, building code permits, that kind of thing. So this is kind of different. And it's related to building and construction because it has to do with health and safety regulations. And the topic is OSHA. And the reason why we put together this whole webinar series is Martin and I. Martin is the back-end IT guy running the platform, Zoom and Facebook and all that, because I'm too lazy to do any of that. I just want to come on and talk story. So anyway, the reason why we put this whole series together is to help everybody understand and get more information on what's going on. And I'm happy to share my knowledge in the field, in the trenches, based on 42 years of construction and building involvement. So regarding the topic, if you look at the screen and see the top photo, that's me on a construction site, and I'm wearing full PPE. You can't see my steel-toed boots, work boots, but I have a safety vest. It looks like sunglasses. It actually is, but it's also safety glasses, hard hat, gloves, and the clipboard is not part of a PPE, but it could be if I have my OSHA form on my clipboard. So I'm also a national building expert, but I'm also a federal inspector. And when I go to inspect federal jobs, I have to be cognizant of the OSHA regulations and all that, and flag it, although I'm not the official OSHA inspector. Okay, so moving on, you can see in the photo I'm wearing my safety equipment, fall protection equipment, because I'm on a rig. This is a 39th story above the ground. So I'm not inside the building, I'm hanging outside the building on a rig. So it's fun. I guess my parents didn't take me to Disneyland when I was a kid, so I got to go on these high-rise buildings and hang off the building. We put together this series of webinars to help building owners, condo associations, property managers, homeowners, contractors, and anybody else who we can help. Share with you some photos that I took. One was recently in January of this year. I was at the Millennium Tower in San Francisco, and if you're questioning whether that building's sinking or not, I can tell you it's sinking because I was there and saw it. And then the month before, in December of last year, 2021, I was in New York inspecting this high-rise building on Park Avenue that allegedly has over 1,500 construction defects. So anyway, that's my travel schedule. So let's begin. Top 10 OSHA violations. Now, what is OSHA? OSHA is a scary word, but you'd be surprised. It means Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's what it means. And it's actually a United States governmental agency under the Department of Labor. And their job is to ensure safety at work and healthful working conditions. So you got occupational, you got safety, you got health, and you got the administration part of it. Now, I know that there's people attending this webinar that may not be from Hawaii. if you're from Hawaii, there's OSHA, but they call it a HIOSH, which is HI stands for Hawaii, and the OSHA, which is the occupational safety and health portion of it. So every state has an OSHA, but OSHA is actually in every single state under the federal OSHA. When you get to the state level, the state has their own OSHA, and they could call it OSHA or call it, whatever the state initials are, or I haven't researched what the name is called in every state, but it's all similar. So just be aware that OSHA, although it's a 4-letter acronym, and it's scary to contractors. When contractors hear the word OSHA, they kind of get anxiety, and maybe they, start running away or something like that. But they don't need to run if they follow the regulations. And the topic is actually top 10 OSHA violations. So as I'm sharing the violations with you, there's a reason why it's a violation, and a reason why, or precautions to take as far as preventing the violations, or doing some mitigation so that the violations don't happen. So there's different steps to take, and I'll be covering that. So top 10 violations. OSHA has jurisdiction over all employer workplaces and not only construction sites. So there's kind of a misunderstanding that OSHA is only at active construction sites. So like if you're in Hawaii, there's a lot of high-rise buildings going on in Kaka'ako, and of course, all those active construction sites are under the OSHA jurisdiction. OSHA can actually pass by, go take a look, and start talking to people about how they can do things better, or even if it's a flagrant violation, they can actually issue a violation and fine. So that's where OSHA stands. Now, the myth on this is that people think that because it's not an active construction zone or site, that OSHA is not involved, and that's not true. If you have a building, any kind of building where you're not actively doing construction work, like a contractor, outside contractor is involved in doing renovation or fixing the building, and it doesn't matter what kind of building it is. You could have a residential condo, you could have a office building, townhouse, a golf course, a library, a school, a hotel, a restaurant. Any of these places could be under OSHA jurisdiction. Okay, so it's not like because it's a private building that OSHA can't come around and is not involved. So that's far from the truth. So let's begin. Let's start with the top 10, number one. Number one, and the reason why this is ranked 1 through 10 is like number one is the most violations in the category, and that's how OSHA rates it. So the number one, fall protection general requirements, that's the most violations that are issued in a given year. And this is based on last year, which is 2021. And I'm pretty sure this year, by the end of this year, 2022, the violation categories will be pretty much the same, because it's been kind of standard. They're shifting around, but the 1 through 10 items is basically, the similar. So what does this fall protection general requirements mean? It means that if you're a worker and you're working above a certain height, and it could be 6 feet, it could be 10 feet, or it could be 400 feet or 800 feet, there's OSHA requirements regarding fall protection and why why is there the requirements? Is because they don't want people to get hurt, fall off a ladder, fall off a building, and maybe even die. So that's the reason for the fall protection. And the general requirements are tie down, lanyards, all your fall protection equipment and all that. And there's quite a bit. So that's the requirements. There's another category in fall protection, but it's not the actual requirements. It has to do with training. And I'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. So number one is fall protection. Anytime you see workers working above a certain height, and let's say one story is 10 feet. So if they're working over one story at any time, okay, on a ladder, or could be a extension ladder, could be a scaffold system, could be a sky climber, swing stage. If they're working above that height, then fall protection is required. So if you're driving around and you see workers on a roof and they don't have any fall protection, that's already a problem. Okay. Now there's some exceptions to the rule, but for the most part, what I'm telling you is correct. Number two, respiratory protection. Now you wouldn't think that this would be number two, but believe it or not, before the pandemic, this is still a requirement. This requirement didn't come to play because of the pandemic. And when we're talking about respiratory protection, it's workers that are handling hazardous materials, whether it's caustic chemicals or whether it's something else. It could be in a construction project. The categories for this could be caulking, paint, gas, kerosene, any kind of building material where if a person breathes it, it could cause serious problems to breathing. And as you know, there's numerous hazardous materials. If you go to any hardware store or garden shop and you read the labels, you'd be surprised. Almost everything is hazardous. And what do? You don't go and start working around gas or hazardous liquids or materials without having respiratory protection, like face masks, and in some cases you have to wear safety goggles or something bigger than and affords more protection than safety goggles. But when the pandemic hit, then of course everybody was wearing masks, but OSHA got involved too because it concerns a worker's health, right? So not only you have your mask for the respiratory protection, you're wearing a mask so that you don't get affected by someone else spreading around the coronavirus, or if you don't have a mask, you could actually spread the virus to other workers. Okay, so it's kind of all encompassing. And there have been pros and cons with OSHA getting involved in that part of it, but the bottom line is still for a worker health protection. Number three, ladders. Now it doesn't matter whether it's a 3-foot ladder, a 6-foot ladder, a 10-foot ladder, or a 30-foot extension ladder. It's pretty much the same. And people have fell off step ladders that are 4 feet or 6 feet and gotten seriously injured. Just the same as people fall off an extension ladder, and the height of the ladder is super high. So the higher you are, the more dangerous that condition is. Yeah. And if you can see that image, you have a step ladder and they kind of attached an extension ladder to the step ladder so the guy can reach the ceiling of the house. I don't know what he's doing, painting or installing a smoke detector or whatever, but is this the right way and safety way to set up a ladder? Of course not, because although the extension ladder is attached to the other ladder and you got the guy standing on the other side of the ladder, supporting with his weight, that's not good. That's in violation of OSHA standards. Okay, so ladders is very important. People fall off ladders and they get hurt all the time. And the other thing is, if your ladder is bent, something in your ladder is bent, like a rung, or maybe the rivet got corroded because your ladder is out in the rain, or one of the brackets got bent or it's loose, you cannot use that ladder. By OSHA standards, you have to throw it away and buy a new ladder. Okay. Also, if you're doing electrical work, you may not want to use a metal ladder. You may want to use a fiberglass ladder or wood that's not conductive. Okay. Number 4, scaffolding. You see this all over the place on small buildings and large buildings. You got looks like a jungle gym. And believe it or not, the scaffolding could be set up where the bottom is not level. That's all, violation. Or you don't have wood planks where workers can step on, and it's like they're walking all over the place, or maybe they don't have proper fall protection. On the mainland, you see more scaffolding than you do in Hawaii. And then in Asia, believe it or not, instead of metal, the scaffolding is built out of bamboo. And it's pretty sturdy until you start getting to the top. And then it doesn't get as sturdy because, it's foundation from the bottom. So as you go higher and higher to the top, it gets less and less sturdy. But the safety codes in China is way more lenient than in the United States. Number 5, hazard communication. Now, like I said before, there's a lot of hazardous materials, and you have it in maybe 1 or 2 gallon or 5 gallon tubs, or 50-gallon metal containers. And you look at the signage, and it's pretty obvious when it's red and it has like a flame that means it's flammable. If it has like a skull and crossbones, that means it's toxic. So it's pretty obvious when you see these that it's hazardous material. So the hazard communication has to do with your labeling, your stickers, your labels on the item. And for the most part, when the contractor or homeowner buys the material, it already comes with a sticker. You don't have to put the sticker on yourself. But if you're using an unimproved plastic container that doesn't have a sticker, and you go, oh well, I guess I'll use this, and you fill it with gas or diesel, that container may not be approved because it doesn't have the label on it. Okay. The other thing is, for communication, if you have storage rooms that have these hazardous materials, you have to have labels and notices, on the door and in the storage room, letting people know. Like if you have a worker that's been there for 5 years, he already knows. But what if you have a new worker one day, or what if that guy is sick or on vacation and they hire a sub that could be from an employee leasing company, and you don't have the notices. Okay, so the notices are required so people don't get hurt, or they don't go in and breathe the stuff or knock down. They go in the storage room and all of a sudden they knock down a container of chlorine that you use to fill the pool. Okay, and the worker starts breathing that stuff and passes out, and no one knows until hours later, like, hey, how come Johnny, I haven't seen him for a couple hours. Okay, so very good warning. What's number 6? Number 6 is lockout, tagout. And what that means is it's electrical. And if the electrician is working, in that vault or in that room, and they're supposed to lock that room and put a tag. Okay, so let's say they're working in a room, they're not finished yet, and they're going on lunch break. They have to tag it. They cannot just lock it and leave, or leave the door open, or put a post-it note that says danger. They have to use the proper wording, and in some cases, they bring their own lock. Okay, so only they have the key or combination. So if they're working in a building and the building maintenance person or property manager wants to get in that building, that storage area, where all your electrical is, the electrical room, they can't, because it's locked and only the electrician has the key. So good idea, right? So with respect to the lockout tagout, there's actually NFPA 70E, and NFPA is National Fire Protection Association, which writes the electrical code, the National Electrical Code, and 70E is the standard for electrical safety in the workplace. So I have my certification, so I know what's in 70E as far as lockout, tagout, electrical hazards and all that. So very important, because people can get easily shocked if they don't know any better and they just go into the room and start touching stuff, right? So that's a pretty big issue. Number 7, fall protection training requirements. Remember earlier I talked about fall protection, but that was general requirements. This has to do with training requirements. So the ABCs of fall protection: A is anchorage, you got to connect to something. B is the body wear, which is the harness, and C is the connecting device. So you would wear the safety harness, and then you attach a connecting device, which is a lanyard, and then that lanyard is attached to some anchorage or connection, and that protects the worker from falling. So when I'm on a rig, I'm wearing my body wear, which is my PPE equipment, and it's a safety harness, and then I attach the harness to my lanyard, and then that lanyard on the other end, the free end, is now connected to my safety line, which hangs on the top roof with safety clamps and all that of the building. So for example, it's a 40-story building and I'm on a rig. I'm attaching my fall protection lanyard to my safety line, which is attached all the way up on the roof. Okay, it's not attached to the rig, the swing stage, because what happens if I attach it to the swing stage and then the swing stage happens to fall to the ground? If I'm attached to the swing stage, now I'm history, because I fall to the ground too with the swing stage. So if I'm attached to something independent, like my safety line that's attached to the roof, if that sky climber swing stage happens to fall for whatever reason, I'm not falling with it. I'm hanging in the air with, attached to my safety line. Okay, so that's the whole concept of it. This whole number 1 fall protection training requirements is to train every single worker on fall protection and how to attach your harness, how to attach your lanyard, what do you attach your lanyard to. And when I'm on buildings and I have to inspect it in high-rise buildings, I'll go up on the roof and I'll inspect all the rigging and everything and safety line to make sure it's okay before I attach to that and go up on the building. And sometimes I see where my safety line is like, it's rope and the rope is kind of frayed and it's not good. And if there's paint on it, it's already no good. If it's frayed, if there's paint on it, if there's a nick, I can tell the contractor I'm not going up on the building because my safety line is inferior. It's not according to OSHA standards. You got to get rid of it and bring a new one. Because sometimes when the building's being painted, paint gets on the safety line, but is that looking new? No. And then the contractor might say, hey, it's only paint, what's the problem? I said, well, that could be a problem, because what if my my clip um, gets stuck because the paint is on the rope? I can't afford to have myself being stuck and hanging up there. So the requirements are training, attending classes, and getting your certification. So I have my fall protection certification, so I know what to do. And because I know what to do, I can scold these other people that are supposed to know what to do, but they maybe get lazy. Okay. Number 8, PPE, personal protection and life-saving equipment, which means protect your eyes and face. So safety goggles, your mask, and that kind of thing. Be careful regarding eye injury, and eye injury could be from chemical spraying, or it could be like when you're working on batteries and the acid gets on you or something. So there's different facets of PPE. Okay. And if you look at this guy, he's standing in something looks like a big auger, and he has a hard hat, but he's wearing safety boots, but I don't see any safety vests or safety goggles or gloves or anything. So maybe he's just there taking a photo and it's not really working. I don't know. Okay, number 10, powered industrial trucks. What is powered industrial trucks? Well, basically it's a high-tech word for a forklift, or it could be a pallet lift. I don't know if you've seen Costco, where they have these pallet lifts and there's no motor. Okay, that doesn't come under this category. If it's a pallet lift and it has a motor and someone is driving it, then that's considered like a pallet forklift. But if you see in the bigger photo, this forklift had fallen off the dock, the loading dock. And what is his load? He's carrying a bomb. And it's interesting because the bomb weighs more than a forklift maybe, and the guy got too close to the edge and the thing tipped over. I don't know where the driver is. I think he ran away, but I would have run away also. Okay, so that's why this is one of the top 10, because people don't follow the regulations. They kind of do weird stuff. Maybe they're not trained. You have to have a certification for forklift. Okay, and when you train, you're supposed to know all the rules. You can't be driving your forklift around and carrying your friend on the fork, that kind of thing. And number 10, machine guarding. What does machine guarding mean? Machine guarding is like a guard. Like if you have a saw and there's a guard, you cannot take that guard off. It's a safety. And then in some cases, the machine guarding is a whole enclosure over some equipment. Okay, so a lot of times people don't follow. They take off the guard, or they're not wearing PPE. Like in this case, the guy's wearing a hard hat and he has his ear protection, which is earmuffs. He has safety gloves. So he's pretty on the ball, safety goggles, that kind of thing. So let me see what else I have. By the way, I have a story about fall protection. So I'm at this job site and I'm looking at the rigging, and then they were like 10 workers there because they're going up on the rig to do spalling repair and painting. And I asked, oh, who's in charge here? And then the foreman said, oh, I'm in charge. So I said, are you a competent person? And the guy says, oh yeah, I'm competent because I've been doing this for 5 years. I know how to set up the rig. I know how to do spalling and painting and all that. I said, okay, so you're not incompetent. And he goes, oh yeah. So I said, do you have your competent person certification? And he's like, what? What's that? So in this case, the competent person is actually not like, are you competent to do the job or not? A competent person by OSHA standards is a title, it's a certification that you get saying that you're a competent person. And I don't know why they use that term, but to me, they could have used a different term. But basically, in OSHA definition, a competent person is somebody who is trained and certified to identify hazards in the workplace and take proper action to eliminate those hazards. That's a competent person. And you have a competent person certification. And I have that because I've been trained and I've been to the course. And that's why when I'm on job sites and I ask them, who's your competent person? And if they say, we don't know what that is, or if they can't show me their certificate, then I'm like, well, the job stops until you guys have a competent person on the job. What is that person? That person is like, could be the foreman and could be the one in charge of the whole project as far as the workers, okay? So how do you prevent violations? Well, you prevent it by understanding the law and then training yourself and your workers, okay? So that's how to prevent it. Understanding and preventing the most common OSHA violations. If you understand the top 10 violations that I already talked about, then you're pretty much, on your way. But there's also other OSHA things that aren't in the top 10. They could be number 11 through 15 or number 20 or something like that. You have to understand those too. So you cannot just have your workers understand. If you're the boss, property manager, superintendent, or even real estate developer or owner of the buildings, you need to understand what the OSHA regulations, what the law is yourself. Don't depend on the workers out in the field, because when there's an OSHA citation, they're going to interview the guy who's in charge. And if you don't know what the rules are, you lost already as far as the training portion of it, okay? Is your property compliant? It doesn't matter whether what kind of building you're working in. If it's not a active construction zone where they're building a new building, it doesn't matter. Your property still has to be compliant. And how do you do that? Well, the training, certification, you monitor the workers and you inspect. And if you're the property manager, resident manager, site manager of a condo, or if you're a hotel operator, general manager of hotels or buildings or shopping centers or schools, whatever your title is, OSHA is still involved. So you need to understand what the rules are, and you need to do your own inspections. Walk around. If you see something that doesn't look right, then say so. Okay. So there's in OSHA compliance, there's danger, warning, caution, notice, safety. You have signage, danger, hard hat area. You don't want to be fined, and you don't even want OSHA to come on your property, right? So if you're following the regulations, if OSHA comes on your property, an OSHA inspector, you have nothing to worry about, right? So you got to understand the law. And there's some myths that I want to talk about now. So there's some myths that OSHA goes to a construction site and they shut down the whole job site if there's one OSHA violation. That's not necessarily true, although they could. But for the most part, the contractors are self-regulated, where if there's a safety issue that comes up, they might shut that whole site down for a day or 4 hours. I've been on some job sites where it was minor. Somebody was working on a second story, and they had a drill, and the drill somehow slipped out of their hands and landed in the parking lot. And the general contractor uh, stopped all workers. They had a meeting, and for 4 hours, the job stopped. So the workers weren't getting paid for those 4 hours. And then in some cases, they just said, okay, safety violation, we're shutting the project down today. So everyone go home. And guess what? When all these people go home, the workers go home, they're not getting paid, right? And so in some job sites, it's a big sign that says 260 days without an accident. So they're proud of that, right? So all it takes is one accident, and then that number goes back to one again, right? So they don't like that. The other thing is, the other myth is upon a OSHA investigation, OSHA can cite you for anything you know they want, and that's not really true. I mean, OSHA, instead of making a citation, they might give a warning and say, you know what, I don't see any signage here. Can you put a sign here, by Friday or whatever? So they're not necessarily bad guys, although because they're the enforcer of the rules, they're kind of portrayed to be the bad guy, and they're just trying to do their job, right? Let's see what else. Here's another myth. Training is offered by OSHA. So you can go to OSHA directly and get trained. That's not really true. OSHA doesn't do any of their own training. They use authorized trainers who are certified by OSHA to train people on fall protection, hazardous materials, and all that. So my certifications weren't given to me directly by OSHA. It was by an approved OSHA trainer. And then the other thing is that if there's an OSHA violation, and let's say it happened 5 years ago, and everyone forgets about it, if OSHA comes to the property again and cites the contractor or owner for the same violation, they could go back in time and look at their records and say, hey, we already cited these guys for an electrical violation. And what they could do is, when they issue the violation, they could put a note that you're a repeat offender. And that doesn't look good, okay, in your record. And if you say, well, that was like 10 years ago, OSHA can say, so what? There's no regulation that says after 5 years, then we don't look at your record. There's no statute of limitations for a fine or citation. And in some cases, I've seen reports where it says whatever the citation was, and it says repeat offender. And it's important that when you get an OSHA fine, they don't just say and give you a paper that says, oh, you're in violation of fall protection, and here's your fine, and give you the paper. They cite the regulation that was not in compliance. So how are you going to argue with that? It's hard. It's almost like trying to argue with a building inspector when they cite the section of the building code that you're not in compliance with, right? It's kind of hard to argue. You got to hire an attorney and all that stuff. So fun. Actual case studies. How about that? OSHA fine, single family house. Contractor working in a house got fined $170,000. A grocery store fined $143,000. A restaurant $128,000. High-rise condo. A contractor got fined $106,000. A hospital $96,000. A hotel $70,000. So as you can see, these are all not low fines. And in some cases, some of these some of these citations were not to a contractor working at these places. It was to directly to the hospital or hotel or condo or restaurant or grocery store, okay? Because their own workers were in violation. And so let's take a hospital, okay? So it's not an outside contractor, it's their own workers working at the hospital that were in violation, and that's why they got fined. So it's a wild west out there where you don't think that, well, I'm running a restaurant or I'm managing a hospital or a condo. It's private property. OSHA has no jurisdiction. No, they actually do. And that's kind of a interesting thing to note. I was on a job, condominium, and we had all these townhouse buildings, and we got an OSHA fine. It was $25,000 because one of the workers were on the roof and they had their harness on, but it wasn't attached to anything. So it's like decoration. And then another condo project I went to, they were digging a trench like 4 feet, and they got cited for confined space violation. So you got to know what the regulations are, and that's why I always advise my condominium clients to don't do the work with your own workers. I don't care if they're skilled at doing it. Hire a third-party contractor, and they're supposed to know what the OSHA regulations are, not you. But it's good for you to know for your own workers. Okay, so basically that kind of wraps up my presentation. Any last words? Yeah, my last words are follow the rules and know what the regulations are so you can be protected and not get fined. What have you missed? In our webinars, we had like probably 24, 26 webinars that you missed, but you didn't really miss it because you can go to our website and watch it online on demand. You don't have to even sign up to pay a fee every month or a year. We're not like Netflix or Showtime or whatever, although we may consider that in the future. But we gave a lot of different interesting webinars on roofing, concrete spalling, plumbing, building code, contractor licensing, hurricane ties, painting, and there's a whole bunch there. Don't want to mention it all. You just go to our website, askbuildingexpert.now.site, and you click on the on-demand webinars. And then you might ask, hey, Lance, what's coming up? Well, what's your next webinars? The webinar you're giving now is very interesting. I think we'll sign up for the next one, but what's your topics? Well, what's coming up briefly is building envelope. A building envelope is the outside of the building. I'm talking about water infiltration conditions, which is the number one cause of construction defect litigation lawsuits. And then lot grade drainage, plumbing, let it flow, talking about supply piping, Millennium Story, the sinking building, we have that upcoming, homeowner association design review. What else do we have? Contractor bidding, hazardous building materials, that's interesting, special inspection, construction inspection, defective building materials, that's another one. And we got a bunch of others planned. Also, if you're interested, we actually planned last year a holiday party in December, and we gave away like $1,000 in gift cards and all that. We have games, prizes, sing along, whatever. So I'm just throwing it out there. I know it's kind of fairly early, but you can't register yet, but soon. And the registration is going to be limited to the number of people. So first come, first serve. Okay. What else do we have? Sorry, somehow my PowerPoint got. So if you have any questions, comments, put it on chat or Q&A in Zoom, and in the Facebook, type in your comments or questions on Facebook, and then hopefully we'll be able to see it. So once again, askbuildingexpert.now.site. That's our website you can go to. And I'm going to stop share because my PowerPoint got haywire here. And Martin, got any questions?
Yes, Lance, we do. We do. Boy, interesting. I was just thinking, see, sometimes when I'm going around, some of these violations you talked about, you can see them all around you sometimes, even in
Oh,
residential areas where I have a lot of construction going on. So
yep,
interesting.
it's all over.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, we have a few questions that have come in. Let's see, what's the first one that we got here? It says, I'm a building manager for an office building. It is a private building and no active construction work is going on. Do the OSHA regulations still apply?
And the answer is yes, OSHA regulations still apply because OSHA is the law to protect employees and workers. That's why it applies. So you don't have to have an active construction site. So let's say in a office building, you have one of your workers, your maintenance guys on a ladder, fixing some piping overhead. OSHA regulation still applies because he's a worker, he's an employee. It doesn't matter who he works for. He doesn't have to work for a construction company or contractor. If he works for the owner or the management company, of the building, or if it's a condo, he's a direct worker for the condo association, he's an employee, OSHA regulations still apply. So that's the problem. People think, it's a private building, OSHA can't come around. That's not true. OSHA regulations are for employees. So in other words, if you have a condo and you hire workers, maintenance workers, those maintenance workers are under the jurisdiction of the OSHA regulations, believe it or not. And that's why when I talk to site managers, resident managers, property managers, and say, do you know that your workers need to follow the OSHA regulations? They go, what? We didn't think so. This is not active construction zone. We're not a contractor. I said, no, the OSHA law doesn't only apply to contractors. It applies to employers, property management companies, site management companies, building management companies, whether it's residential or commercial, it's pretty much all the same as far as the OSHA jurisdiction.
Okay, very good. Well, we seem to be having questions from condo people here. So let me hit the next question. My question is, are workers of a condo building subject to the OSHA rules? And is the association required to provide our workers with proper safety equipment? Good question. The property manager told me that the workers need to provide their own gloves and masks. So what say you, Lance, on that?
Okay, so first of all, OSHA has jurisdiction over condominiums, condo buildings. It doesn't matter what type, high-rise, townhouses, single family, if it's in a homeowner association. And as far as, and this is interesting, as far as the PPE, protection, equipment and all that, the worker is not required to provide their own. Okay, and here's what the law says. The law says that if you're an employer and you're requiring your worker to do certain things that require PPE, gloves, safety goggles, a mask and all that, the employer, the company, is required by law to provide PPE to the employees, to the workers. So in other words, the company is mandated to buy the gloves, safety goggles, whatever that worker needs to do the work. It's not a voluntary thing like, oh, our maintenance guy is nice. He's gonna go to City Mill and buy his own gloves and safety goggles because we're not supplying. No, actually, if OSHA finds out that the employer is not providing, they could fine the employer for not providing the proper equipment to keep the worker safe. And most people don't know that. But most companies already know that. They supply equipment, but then sometimes they go cheap, and we have no money. You're doing the work, just bring your own gloves. Don't you have gloves at home? Don't you have go buy a hard hat or whatever. So regarding the masks, okay, when the pandemic hit, the worker brought their own mask. Okay, but if you really read the intent of the law, if the worker has to wear a mask to protect himself or herself and other people, then the employer should provide masks for them. And I mean, there's debates, but when you think about it, it's kind of similar to safety gloves or shoes for that matter. Okay, so be careful. That's the answer. You don't want to get a citation or anything, but OSHA's probably gonna give a warning first. But then if they come back another month and interviews the guy and he's saying, "Oh yeah, I still got to buy my own gloves," and then they can issue a citation then. So, any other questions?
Yes, Lance. Looks like another condo question. In a building condo, I've been on the board for 8 years, and we have never sent any of our workers for safety classes or fall protection training. Are we required to do this? Good question.
Well, you know what can happen, and I'll give you an example. Let's say a worker falls off the ladder. OSHA's going to come in and interview the worker and say, what happened here? Okay, and then once they figure out what happened, how the guy fell off, could have been an accident, they're going to say, did you take any training about fall protection? And they may say, no. Then you know what? That employer is going to get a warning or a citation because they didn't train their workers correctly. So the answer is yes, you have to pay for the training, and you have to make sure that the worker gets certified. And don't think that because you don't have any money, oh, well, the worker's the one that got to get trained, so they got to pay for the training. No, that's not how it goes. The employer will pay for the training, and the employer has to monitor. And in the case of an accident, once OSHA finds out that the employer didn't send the person to get training, or even train the person, already it's a black mark against them, right? So it's a requirement. It's your duty. It's like anything else, your duty to train the worker, okay? Not the worker's duty or anybody else's. You're the employer, you're hiring this person, you're paying them, you're responsible for that worker to get the proper training. And then here's another thing to be careful of. If your maintenance guy is doing top level maintenance work, and then you got a next guy who's not as skilled, but that worker number one, your top worker, you sent it to training, but then you didn't send number two because, oh, he's not going to do that kind of work, right? You think. But what happens if worker number one gets sick or on vacation? Worker number two has to step up, right? And if worker number two steps up and he's not trained, bad things could happen. And then when there's an investigation, finds out the guy's not trained, oh, that's not good. So just be careful out there. Do we have any other comments?
Yes, there's one more officially here that I've received here. Is it true that OSHA does not inspect construction work on single-family houses built new or houses that are being renovated?
Well, OSHA is not required to inspect residential. It is mainly commercial. And when I say commercial, I'm talking about those examples that I gave earlier: shopping center, hotels, golf courses, libraries, schools, churches, that's all commercial. But when you're talking about a single family residential, that's not considered commercial, okay? But if there's violations that, the contractor's building, or he has subcontractors, OSHA can step in, and they've done it before, where people complain, and people don't understand that OSHA is not um, okay, here's an example. Somebody called OSHA and complained because the house next door, and it's a neighborhood, okay? It's not commercial, it's residential. House next door, uh, there was an empty lot and they were building and they were making too much noise. So uh, the uh, neighbor next door called OSHA to complain about the noise. And OSHA said, we're not responsible for that. So how do I know? Because that person called me and said, "Oh, is it true? I called OSHA to complain about the noise, and OSHA said that's not our jurisdiction." And I said, OSHA doesn't reply to you as a homeowner making a complaint against a contractor. They're not. Their existence is not there to protect you as a homeowner. Their existence is protect employees of companies and workers. And so, oh, what do I do? And I said, well, call Department of Health if it's too noisy, right? But what happened is OSHA went out anyway to check, and then there were other things that the contractor didn't comply with, but it had nothing to do with the noise issue. Okay, so that's kind of an example of some mindset or people thinking that they're going to call OSHA to turn the contractor in. If there's violations based on, the top 10 that I gave, then yeah, they could call OSHA and turn the contractor in for that. But the contractor's not going to go back to that person and say, "Oh, thank you for reporting it." Um, they're basically going to send a notice or violation to the contractor, and then you're like out of the picture. Okay, so anyway, we got any comments on Zoom chat or Q&A or Facebook?
Oh, we don't have anything else, but I had a question. It seems like training is a big issue, and it seems like a lot don't get it. So where would you be able to help them to get the training? Or where would they go, or how would they get the proper training for whatever those things are that they need training on?
Oh, there's several companies that do safety training for construction, contractors and construction work. And so if you research those, safety training, construction safety training, or use those words, and you can find companies that specialize in that. And most of the training can be done online or classroom, although there's some where you have to go out in the field. Like when I took my fall protection certification, it was before the pandemic, and it was like a classroom. But then there were harnesses and all that everyone tries on and fits and inspects and all that. So some of it, I think most of it could be done online or classroom, but some may need to be in the field. Yeah, like the forklift certification. I know in some cases that you learn in the class, but then you go and look at a forklift and maybe drive it around, and they kind of test you and all that. So that's interesting. Hey, Martin, did you check Facebook, see if there's any comments?
Yes, there's no comments. There's just been viewers. Yeah, nobody put any particular questions
Oh,
in there.
okay, that's fine. I mean, it's okay to listen and don't need to comment, or maybe they'll comment later.
Yeah.
Maybe people are gonna, watch the on demand later on Facebook, or hopefully they tune into our webinar on demand section and watch not only this one but others that they choose. So um, I've talked about an hour already, and usually we try to limit our webinars to an hour so we don't bore people, and we know people are busy, they have to work and all that. So on behalf of Martin and I, and Ask the marketing and building expert. By the way, speaking of marketing, we also give a separate marketing webinar series on social media marketing and other stuff. So if you own your own company or entrepreneur, small business owner, check us out too on askmarketingexperts.now.site. So once again, we appreciate you guys for tuning in, and hopefully you'll join us for the next webinar. And until then, if you have any questions, comments that come up, just email us or get a hold of us in some way, carrier pigeon, smoke signal, whatever. We're open to all of that, or text, that's fine too. So on behalf of our webinar series, Ask Building Expert, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Aloha.